Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you for the nice welcome. And as he said, my name is Marie-Francoise, but most people say just MF. I think that it makes it easier. And just a quick anecdote. I remember as I was country director in Nigeria, I was going from Abuja to Lagos on the plane, and my neighbor said, "You have an accent, where are you from?" So I said, "I'm French." And he looked at me and said, "This is the first time that I see a black French." So they are black French. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here, and the other passion that you mentioned, Christophe, is really to be with young people. One thing that I learned from my mother, who is quite old, I'm not going to tell you her age, but because you will know mine, she said, the best way to be with young people, to stay young, is to be with young people. And I've been practicing that, and indeed, it's actually quite true. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I would like to thank Christophe, the Africa Arena team, to put this agenda, because I think that this is the issue of our time. In post-COVID, I think that you have the numbers in South Africa. South Africa lost about 2 million jobs since the beginning of the pandemic, has already recovered about 400,000, which means that there are still 1.7 million jobs that are lost that need to be recovered. I'm in charge of Southern Africa, and we have a similar situation in each of my countries, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Namibia, and of course here. But that was on a background where you already had high unemployment and high level of inactive people. In fact, I pulled the numbers. If you take just about South Africa, we are talking of 8 million people between age of 15 and 34 that are either unemployed or inactive. And I'm not talking of those who are students, that is massive, So I was working with my team, and we are talking of training 10,000 people, and I'm saying, what are we talking about? So really, the conclusion, and we are going to speak with some of the members of the ecosystem who are in the room, it is happening, but the key challenge is that how to bring that to the next level, and this is what Christophe asked me to talk about. We organized, when I was in charge, not just of Tunisia, I was in charge of the whole Maghreb, Algeria, Morocco, Libya, and Malta. And we managed to establish an ecosystem, a platform, a startup network. And it's amazing to see the power of bringing the actors together in various dimensions, tackling, the government, going after the government in terms of the policies, mobilizing financing, mobilizing corporate. There is a lot that can be done, and that is essentially, at the beginning, my message to you. How can we see building on what exists? I know that there are already a number of platforms that are existing. How to bring that together so that we can tackle this ambition that I mentioned, this 8 million, because the potential is there, It's amazing to see, I've been visiting this country. It's just amazing. Each time I go, what I see the potential. I went to Lesotho. 2 months ago, I was in Lesotho, and see what they are doing in the leather, the tapestry. I'm thinking, Christophe, you have Habitat, this type of home stores. You could have that, at scale. So what prevents us from doing that? So the message, let us do it together. So what I thought I would do briefly, and certainly most of you know what I'm going to say, is kind of say, what is the ecosystem? What does it look like now? What are the challenges? And then maybe point out to these platforms that I'm suggesting, how we can scale up, how we can put it together. So in terms of entrepreneurship, as you know, there are 3 elements that are critical, 3 engagements that you need to have to make it work. First, really, is access to markets, access to expertise, and access to finance. These are the 3 elements. So what is happening along these 3 elements in the region? And certainly, let me start with South Africa, where we are. I was actually quite encouraged in terms of the access to market and the expertise to see that things are being organized, are shaping up. There are about 100 registered incubators who provide support, as I understand. And out of that, half of them are really fully active in various sectors and in the high technology, fintech, agri-tech, and actually I had the opportunity, we had a competition to see what is being done in smart agriculture, smart, agricultural finance. I mean, the ideas are there in green tech, now in the post-COVID, in healthcare. So there are already, a number of institutions that are existing that are starting to tackle, this challenge. Looking at the other countries, because I have the ambition of having this platform at the level of the SACU countries, because at least they are sharing more or less, the same currency, except of course for Namibia and Botswana, but at least a custom union that should facilitate flow of goods and services through the union. Botswana is not badly placed, and in fact, I looked at the Global Entrepreneurship Index, which is an index which looks at the level of the ecosystem in the various countries. And to my surprise, Botswana ranks before South Africa. Botswana is 52, South Africa is 57, and Namibia is 61. So, and that is out of 137 countries. So at least, you are not the top. We have the OECD countries, the US, Japan, Canada in the top, but these countries are coming. The ones that are behind are really Eswatini and Lesotho. And Eswatini, in fact, very public-driven. There is a park, a technology park that has been established by, the Royal Science and Technology Park that has been created, but essentially public-led innovation activities. I guess that, the small nature of the market does not help. In Lesotho, it's a little bit better, but we still have, the challenge of accessing grant fundings, but also having the right innovators, incubators to support, the firms. And I think that for these two countries, and this may be the first point that I would like to put on the table, is that how to mobilize the diaspora. You have an important Lesotho diaspora here in South Africa, same thing for Eswatini. And when I was in the Maghreb, I realized that they used a lot the diaspora from France, but also from the US. So maybe one point that we can consider as we move forward is that, a few figures, and that is Africa-wide in terms of the African tech ecosystem. So for 2020, there were about 360 rounds that were, concluded for about a little bit less than 400 million US dollars. And out of that, South Africa had 260 out of the 359. So South Africa is well represented, although I should tell you that Nigeria is taking the lead over South Africa, as well as Kenya. They are moving. So we need to do something because the potential is there. How do we make sure that you are not staying behind when actually, the opportunities are there? So going a little bit, more specifically in terms of the issue of financing. So not long ago, our team, the World Bank team, did a study to see what was the issue about, early stage financing. And we found out three things. The first one is that there was a lack of funding at seed level and also at later stage. You have more concentration, at the early stage, and I think that I was discussing with someone from the ecosystem who was confirming that this is exactly how it is. So, and also not so many funds for the Black community, for female entrepreneurship. It's a little bit skewed. So there is really a need to rethink and open so that the access can be more inclusive. So that is really the first. Of course, with that, that means that the pipeline of investable companies is limited because, the more you put money, you create the opportunity and you can scale up. So then we have to see how to work on that. And last thing is also linked with that is that do we have a conducive legal environment? So the laws, the regulation, the incentive, the access, to the tax incentive for that, all this needs to be really worked. And I'm pleased to know that in the case of Southern Africa here, you've been looking at developing a Startup Act that will create, the condition for startup to be established in a much easier way. And this is something that I did when I was, working in the Maghreb, and I will come back to that. So I don't want to spend too much time on that because all these elements, you know them. So I want to push in the remaining 10 minutes that I have to focus on what is it that we can do. So as I was saying, the idea is to see how do you create these communities, these startup communities, and that we use that as a really force, a strength to bring together the players on a different front. First of all, knowledge sharing, because in fact, if you have market opportunities here, they can be replicable in all the countries. So exchanging between the startups, the ideas. We had, I think 2 months ago, we organized a webinar, and there was somebody from Nigeria, and he's developing, the Uber truck. And that has been actually quite successful. He has been able to raise funds under the Series A. And I think that he was about to get started and come in Southern Africa. So we told him, you can partner with other startups here. So the sharing of information is absolutely critical. Last week, I went to visit the research center of Ecole. And they have developed, module to prepare to develop solar energy using container. So the equipment can be put in the container, the batteries, and just outside or on top of the container, you put the solar panels. So that is really something that can be absolutely fabulous. It's modular, it can be replicable. How can we nurture companies in this area? In Lesotho, you have only 50% access to energy. Namibia, about 60%. And yet, these are vast countries where you need off-grid solutions. So the reason I am mentioning that is that, the unit that I visited in the research center of ESCOM last year could deliver, about service energy for one village. So really, the access to information, sharing information. Then I think that how can we think of developing the culture of angel investing? Because this is where I think, as I said, there is a shortfall. And I think that not only, I'm thinking of maybe 2 or 3 ways of doing that. First of all, the venture capitals. How do we suggest to them to go into this niche where there is potential? Secondly, of course, probably there is a need to bring some subsidy, how we can bring the government. When I was in the Maghreb, in Morocco, the government itself said, this is where we see a market failure because the financial market in Casablanca is as sophisticated as the financial place here in South Africa. But this niche was not really served. So they said, we want to come to the World Bank, borrow money from you to put the money. So there was a competition process, and 10 incubators were selected, were given grant money to indeed create these deal flows. I started to discuss that with NT. I'm making small inroads there, but if you can talk to them as well, I think that that will facilitate because it's a nice way, to move on. Then the next point I want to mention is the open innovation partnership. We need now to see, using this platform, how you facilitate the collaboration between the public sector, and tell you that we have signed an MOU with BUSA. And one point, for example, that BUSA has pushed is to say, we need to ensure that the corporate pays the SME the bills within 30 days, because, it starts with some discipline there. So I think that this is... Secondly, how more and more you will see that the corporate, and here we have a CEO of a large corporation, I hope that it's going to talk about that, how you ask, the SMEs to bring with innovative ideas. So at the moment, we are actually launching what we call a corporate innovation, a challenge that will be launched next week, that we will do with IFC. 12 corporates have agreed to participate, and basically, the startup will be asked to find a solution to a problem. And then once they win, they are being supported, so that right there you have the first, contract, and you can show and demonstrate what you can do. Then we also have, between the public and the private sector, the same type of collaboration. And here I want to use the example of Botswana, because the government of Botswana decided on the digital to solve public sector solution of service delivery, to call on private, startup to come with solutions. So I think that just giving, these two examples show us what can be done in terms of the innovation challenge and solution. So I want to maybe think of an idea where we could say public sector, corporate, startup, and private as a way of creating a platform. So the last one that I want to mention, I'm not going to be too long, is really what we started to discuss in terms of the regulation, the law, and working with the government. There are so many areas where perhaps the government does not see, the importance, for the startup. So one is establishing, the startup, platform, and I think having a startup act that is really that provides the incentive, mobilizing the financing. I should tell you just as an anecdote on that when I was in Tunisia, I met just in a forum like that, the startup, and said, we are really struggling to mobilize, the government on that. So I said, you know what? I'm going to see the Prime Minister. I should tell you just as an anecdote on that when I was in Tunisia, I met just in a forum like that, the startup, and said, we are really struggling to mobilize, the government on that. So I said, you know what? I'm going to see the Prime Minister, which I did. I remember vividly, it was December. So I went to see the Prime Minister. I said, Mr. Prime Minister, you are saying that you want to create jobs for your people. This is what they are suggesting. They would like to have a much more agile platform, legal platform. Well, the text was approved by Cabinet early January and was approved by Parliament at the end of January the following year. That was the fastest approval, in the history of the country. And today, everybody is talking of this Startup Tunisia Act. What is important is that it has led to mobilizing financing. So just like we did in Morocco, we did in Tunisia, $70 million. By the way, in Morocco, it was $50 million. So it's not big, but it's not small in terms of, getting starting on that. And now there is really a platform. So in summary, what I'm trying to say is that if we agree that to go to the next level, we need to have this community, let us think at how this can be done. Maybe it can start with a digital. I know that, Christophe, you are promoting already the Digital Collective Africa. This is one idea, how to apply that to the sub-region. I think that will be really helpful. So if we have that, then going to the government to see how we can mobilize them and maybe aggregate, because what I've seen is a lot of fragmentation of what exists. Too many little, I said we are not going to do the trick if we train 2,000 people, if we are making, 5, but we have to start step by step. Have the 10 one, the next 21, the 100, and then all of a sudden we will wake up to say, oh, well, we have a startup nation. We have a startup platform. So in sum, this is what I'm thinking. And I hope that we can take it from there and see how we can work together. I know it's not a typical area from the World Bank. I mean, when you talk of the World Bank, you talk of the 80s, the Washington Consensus. But as far as I'm concerned, the World Bank, where I am in Southern Africa, is to push the startup, push, this ecosystem, mobilize, solidify us, and then let's see how we can encourage those who are already doing very well. I'm quite encouraged to see and go to the next level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much for that lovely...